There he completed a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from a top 10 university before he came to the United States for grad school. And continuing his studies, he earned both a master's and a PhD in electrical engineering from the University of Texas in just under 5 years. So clearly, if I haven't made it clear, this family is smart. And since he had free time as a student, he apparently co-founded a software startup company for digital engineering along the way. That company grew to a $120 million valuation with customers as notable as the US Air Force and the US Army, and this is when he was just getting started as a student. But then 9/11 happened, and like many of us, a sense of patriotism and a desire to give and to serve led him to join the Army as a civilian, working as a systems engineer at US Army TACOM, the Tank and Automotive Command in Warren, Michigan. And it was there that he saw a huge technical gap in the workforce, which has been a theme throughout Raj's career in the Army. And he wasted no time, of course, in leaving his mark. He led various systems engineering teams that built the first up armor kits for Humvees in support of combat operations. He led various engineering teams in support of MRAP acquisition, established the Army Product Lifecycle Management Program, and he fought for data rights way ahead of his time for weapon system platforms with OEMs. His efforts led him to move to the Army Material Command headquarters in 2009, where he served as the very first Chief Technology Officer anywhere in the Army under General Ann Dunwoody, and then later under General Dennis By. At the time, CTO was not a well-used term in the government and only known in the private sector. And so Raj, of course, was a trailblazer by bringing what the CTO's roles and responsibilities were into the Army. But he left the Army, and he ultimately came back, so we'll forgive him. And he continued his career of service in 2012. But this time it was to shore up healthcare.gov and the launch of course, the website to help people get onto the health insurance exchanges. He was on the case, and he worked very closely at the time in government with both the White House and the US Digital Service to successfully relaunch the system that enabled 16 million Americans to get health care finally for the first time. After going back to industry briefly in 2013, where he led Deloitte's defense technology practice as a senior partner for 7 years, he got the call to come back. All good stories end up coming full circle, and it allowed Raj to return to the Army in 2020 as our first civilian CIO. Now in this role, as many of you know, he's responsible for the entire IT portfolio of the Army, including a workforce of 15,000 civilian IT professionals and over 10,000 service members, providing oversight and support to the Army's $18 billion spend on IT and cyber alone. I've always said this when I've talked over the last year in this job about my experience working in the Army before versus coming back into this role. You know, my prior experience, I noted that the Army was a self-avowed late adopter of technology. And I always tell the story where there was a senior executive at a meeting I attended saying that the Army deliberately bought, the 5th or 6th generation version of every piece of software it used because it wanted the rest of the world to wring out all the possible risk before the Army would deploy it. And I always point out the fact that that's what was wrong with the way that we did things before, and that approach certainly doesn't fly today, and it wouldn't work under this regime. I note that because nobody demonstrates the break from the past, I think, quite the way that Raj does. Over the last 2 years, he has led IT reform and digital transformation across the Army in an unprecedented way. Adoption of cloud, AI, data analytics technologies, all of which were designed to help the Army achieve digital overmatch against our potential adversaries. And I've been able to work very closely with Raj personally over the last year, since my very first day as Army Undersecretary. Whether it's working together to develop a comprehensive review of our network to figure out what do we need to invest in through the capability portfolio reviews in order to make foundational investments that will help accelerate our efforts, to dealing with the rollouts of specific policies that are going to help us drive our agenda moving forward. I've noticed that Raj has been a fantastic partner from day one. I always tell people, when I got confirmed by the Senate, the very next morning, the first text that I got were from Secretary Wormuth and from Dr. Raj Iyer. in that order. And Raj Iyer said, hey, I'm really looking forward to working with you. There's a lot I want to get on your calendar to discuss. He just did not waste any time. And I love that about him. I thought that his energy was infectious. But Raj really has been at the forefront over the last several years of supporting our objective, which is to build a data-centric Army through the development and execution of our digital transformation strategy. And he helped establish an overarching framework and vision, establishing lines of effort, and specific initiatives that prioritize resources to help the Army achieve a more ready, a more lethal, and a more modern force. He has had a strong role in the governance structure centered on the Digital Oversight Council and through the CIO Executive Board to assess strategy implementation, overcome barriers, and to ensure the synchronization of required resources. Alongside our G6, John Morrison, and others, he's championed the Army's Unified Network Plan, the Army Data Plan, and the Army Cloud Plan to achieve digital transformation from the enterprise all the way to the foxhole, which is where we need to focus on. Raj provided consistently outstanding technical advice on software approaches that affected requirements determination all the way to the adoption of agile development approaches, best practices from industry, and continuous integration and continuous development alongside DevSecOps. He's been tireless and relentless in support of our commands, particularly with USERPAC and USER. His visits to the theater, talking to soldiers about what works. In fact, just in his out call with me this morning, he mentioned how important it was to get out there and talk to the soldiers, because he said you'd get a different perspective from the people that live with it every day, as opposed to talking about these issues here in the building. Across all of Raj's service to the Army, he's seen countless opportunities to influence lasting change. And I think that that is what I take away from Raj's experience. He has the true spirit of an entrepreneur. He's aggressive, he's passionate about the causes and the approaches that he wants to try. He's innovative in the solutions that he's willing to take on. And I think like all entrepreneurs, he's a very fast talker. He's pushed boundaries, he's questioned the status quo, and this isn't easy work, I think, in one of the world's most impenetrable bureaucracies. But he has genuinely created excitement around his ideas, and I can say that he's brought many of them to fruition. So if I think about what has made Raj so successful, it's not only that he understands what are industry's best practices, how do you apply them. He knows that from his time in the private sector. But he blends that with a deep knowledge of how the Army is organized, how it works, which organizations and institutions are responsible for different aspects of the process. And I think he synthesizes and fuses those two bodies of knowledge very, very effectively on behalf of the Army. All I know is it's going to be very hard to replace that type of expertise, and it will be big shoes for anyone to come in and fill. But for today, I'm happy to be a part of this celebration and to mark this important milestone in Raj's career. And on behalf of all of us, including Secretary